Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. We got drilling down into one particular program today, but also one particular state, which is always very interesting in the world of college football. This state is very important to the world of college football, to the ecosystem. So Manny Navarro from The Athletic joins me and Ari. Manny covers Miami, and it's been an adventure for the past year covering Miami. Manny, on Friday, the news broke that Miami had fired Josh Gattis, the offensive coordinator. He goes from the Broyles Award winner at Michigan in 2021 to fired following the 2022 season. So what happened there?
Yeah, just a disastrous first season, really. I mean, I think Josh came in expecting to have the same offensive lineman that he had at Michigan, right? And he realized, wait a minute, it's not the same offensive line. This isn't the same group of players I had. And it was just sort of a rough transition from what Rhett Lashley used to do at Miami when they were averaging close to 30 points with Tyler Van Dyke throwing it all over the field to trying to run a Michigan-style offense that Mario Cristobal wanted to put in. So it was just a bad fit from the get-go. And I think as the season went on, became evident to Mario and to people around the program that you had to make a change and bring in a different kind of guy.
Andy, you know what always strikes me about situations like this? And you tell me, Manny, if you think I'm nuts. But it's like, who's to blame here? Is Gattis to blame or is Mario to blame?
Yes. It's the head coach. It's his
no, they're
job.
both. I mean, both of them. I mean, Josh has to know the roster before he takes the job. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, and this is what the Michigan people said when Josh left, was how much input was Josh going to have in 2022? Because Matt Weiss's influence had increased. Sharon Moore obviously had a ton of influence, and he was the offensive line coach. So he was directly responsible for the group that was responsible for their jump as an offense. And now Matt Weiss is gone now, so who knows? Maybe they call him back. But it is also on Josh to understand, if you're going to leave a pretty good job, that you need to know what the personnel is at the job you're going to, and also the person you're going to work for. Because Mario will tell you he's tough to work for. Like he's not hiding that.
No, not at all. I think ultimately what it was is exactly what you said, Andy, in the sense that he didn't know the roster, right? He came in, he didn't do enough of his homework to really understand what am I going to be working with. And I would say the same thing for Mario. I think year one for Mario was sort of a, wow, we really don't have what we need here in terms of playmakers at the wide receiver position. We don't have the big lineman that I need to run the offense that I want. So it was a learning experience all around. But I put most of the blame on Mario because, look, he spent 4 months almost interviewing offensive coordinator candidates. It took forever. It was a long process.
The list of names, I looked at your story the other day. I had forgotten like Liam Cohen and Andy Ludwig, and like it is a huge list of names.
Yeah, he talked to everybody, and ultimately, my understanding, and from writing the story with Bruce, a month into the season was, it was like his third or fourth choice. Gattis was. It wasn't like the first guy he really offered the job to. So, to me, this is just part of Mario struggling to really figure out what he wants to do, and then going after that guy and convincing him to come. And Gattis sort of fell in his lap. It was sort of the perfect opportunity to hire him at that time.
Mario, we talked. Mario.
He did have the same first name as the last Miami head coach, but not this time.
It's hilarious because I used to call you Manny Diaz in Slack sometimes.
Yes, you did.
And you have to forgive me because I was driving till like 2:30 in the morning, and I'm very tired. Manny, Mario Cristobal was a home run hire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because he was known as this big shot recruiter who had Miami ties. But when he left Oregon, the number one thing, and I don't know if it was spiteful fans or Oregon fans trying to warn the world, is that, yes, he can acquire talent. He's a very good recruiter. We have questions about how he can manage his team on the field. And I think before you get to the field and mismanage your team, you have to manage your hires the right way. And I don't know if people have an appreciation for how important assistants are. I mean, even assistants further down than the coordinators, like offensive line, tight end. I mean, every single assistant is important because if you have a liability on your team, you're going to be in trouble. Like, do you question whether or not Mario Cristobal is completely on it in all regards?
I think it's a fair question to ask, Ari, because, again, like the guys who are the best at this, they have to be good at everything, right? They got to be great at recruiting. Really got to have their head into that. And then they got to be great at just finding assistant coaches who fit what they want and can execute what they want and delegating that authority. I think in year one, Mario came in wanting to handle everything. Like he wanted to run the entire recruiting department. And I just think, I don't know that the right kind of focus in terms of personnel was put there. Because he was so focused on just getting the recruiting department right and getting the kind of players that he wanted in that first class. So even though he took 3 or 4 months to hire this staff, I don't know how much focus was there because he was doing it while he was recruiting. And sometimes head coaches can bite off a little more than they can chew. And I think in Mario's case, like I said, Gattis was his third or fourth choice to hire as OC. I don't know that he put all the right kind of focus he needed to right in year one on hiring a coach. And I don't know that he's going to do that in year two. I don't know that that's going on right now with the current OC search and the quarterbacks coach that he needs to replace. Like, I don't know that he's doing all those things because he's so focused on recruit that, that's why I feel like this rebuild of Miami. I have people calling me saying, "Hey, man, you said that you think they're going to go 6-6 next year or 7-5," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's the kind of team that they're going to be because, like, that's the process. You got to bring in the players and then bring in the coaches and put them around them to be successful." I just think Mario. A long-winded way of answering your question, Ari. I just think Mario is so focused on recruiting right now that's his top priority.
You guys are the athletic director of a school.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to fix first?
I want to win. I've turned around on this. This is after doing that Danny White story a couple months ago, where Danny White explained his hiring process to me for various coaches. When he hired Lance Leipold at Buffalo, he hired Heupel at UCF and at Tennessee. He explained, and if you look, his football, men's basketball, women's basketball, all those hires have been pretty successful. He's like, year one success matters more than people think. You got to be successful in year one. If you don't, you are behind the 8 ball and you may never get out of that. Like the coach may never be able to dig out of that.
And I think for Mr. The Stars Matter person, getting the right coaching staff and fixing all of the administrative stuff within the program takes precedent over recruit right away.
Right. Because, I mean, Heupel's an interesting example. They didn't have great recruiting classes. They had a highly ranked one this year in 2023, but they started winning right away. So, I mean, that's
any
that's
Hendon Hookers laying around in Coral Gables right now, or what?
Well, that's the thing. Hendon Hooker was a cast off from Virginia Tech who didn't.
No, I know, but the fact that he turned out to be as good as he was a certainly a help in that regard.
Yeah, and then so Manny, I want to talk to you about this anyway because we can't really talk about Mario Cristobal in Miami without also talking about Billy Napier in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
They're very intertwined, whether it's Jaden Rashada, Cormani McClain, or just
every other recruit.
Yeah,
bumping
head-to-heads on recruit.
Yeah.
But then there's this completely different philosophy going on in Tallahassee out of necessity because they don't have the same amount of money where they're paying the guys who are actually good at college football and getting them to stay and like having no opt-outs in the bowl game. And it's crazy because, Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal got hired based on their ability to succeed in the old way. But I don't know if the old way works.
Right. It's a great question, Andy. I think about that all the time too, because, Miami fans, like I've said this to a couple of people, like I worry sometimes that Mario would have been the perfect coach 10 years ago for Miami. Because there was no transfer portal. There was none of that stuff.
Well, and like when they flipped the switch and decided, okay, we're going to spend like Clemson now.
Right.
Like spending on that stuff mattered 10 years ago. Obviously now spending on something else matters. And Miami's well set up for that too, but it's still not easy.
No, you have to be good at everything here to really build the kind of team you want. And, Dabo obviously continues to not care about the transfer portal. At some point, I think he's going to have to. But, for in the state of Florida, as far as Mike Norvell is concerned, like he's just figured it out. Like you bring in 15 to 17 high school recruits. You spent, the rest of the of your product is transfers, and you just do the best you can with that. And it's worked. And he's got them in a position this coming season to be very, very good. And then to build, I think, an excellent recruiting class off of that success, right? The rise to 10 wins.
That's the tricky part is you got to then turn it to high school recruiting. As Chris Callahan in the chat points out, Kirby Smart is making the old way work pretty good right now. High school recruiting is still what matters.
Well, I'm happy that
Georgia, at Alabama, at Ohio State.
Chris Callahan jumped into that, because when you said that in your back of your head, I was thinking, like in the back of my head, when you said they were hired to do the old way, I was like, the old way is the way.
You just have to get away titles, but you got to keep your job long enough to get to that point.
So my question, I guess, here is, you were talking about the difference between Florida State and Florida and Miami. And I think what Mike Norvell is doing at Florida State is great. But I think that it's great for a 10-win team. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the ceiling recruiting that way. The
problem is, if that 10-win team, which isn't good enough to win the national title, keeps beating the crap out of Miami and keeps beating Florida, he's going to get them fired. And they're never going to get to the other place.
But at a certain point, doing it the Florida State way has to turn into the Kirby Smart way.
Yes.
Because doing it the Florida State way now for 8 years and going 10-2 or 9-3 and being good and beating Florida and Miami when they're not the best versions of themselves is only going to get you so far. Like, the old way is the only way to have a sustained national championship contender long term. And until I see a team buy their way out of it with NIL, I don't know what that is. So, like, if you are Miami,
it's going to be a while before you see that. Because
so maybe the new way is get through the first 2 years, get the water to stop chopping so much, and then try to slowly descend back into the old way.
Well, and Manny, this is the interesting thing with Mario, because he does, and the thing I appreciate most about him is he cares about what happens up front and understands what happens up front matters more. You look at Miami's 2023 recruiting class, the 4 highest ranked players, 2 offensive tackles, 2 edge rushers. Like,
USC's on the other coast going like this with their magnifying.
wait, where are the receivers? Where are the quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it takes everything, right, to ultimately get there, but it does start up front, and especially with these SEC teams and the way that they dominate and win championships every year. It's like they've all got dudes up front, and if you don't have dudes up front, so Mario, from that perspective, obviously learned something when he was around Nick Saban and how he built championship programs, and he's carried it on, and he did it at Oregon. He built really good offensive lines at Oregon, had great defensive edge rushers, Kayvon Thibodeau, all those guys. So I think he's building it the right way. But in the end, like, you do need to mix in the transfer portal if you're not Georgia, Alabama, or Ohio State. You just have to. It's the only way you're going to get the kind of players to fill the needs you have. I
got to say, as I look down this class, Manny, we need Robbie and Bobby Washington to become stars.
Like, oh yeah,
that's just great brother names. Like, why did I not name my kids Robbie and Bobby? I could have done it with the boy Robbie and the girl Bobby if I wanted to. Bobbi.
You remember their dad, Bobby Washington Sr., the running back Miami Killian back in the day? Yeah. He signed with Miami and ended up, I think, at NC State and some other schools and never ended up playing. But both those kids are phenomenal. Oh yeah. Both those kids are very good.
I'm just excited about that. But that's those guys have to hit. So let's talk about the roster at Miami right now. Because Mario's looking for an offensive coordinator. There was a lot of excitement coming in because Tyler Van Dyke was so good at the end of Manny Diaz's last season. And the thought was, this will just transfer over.
Right.
So what happened to them from an offensive standpoint?
Lost a lot of good players early in the year to injury. Xavier Restrepo was probably their most experienced receiver coming back. He got hurt second or third week of the season, missed 7 games. Zion Nelson had knee surgery, never got off the ground, played 60 snaps. Both of those guys were going to be that was going to be their best offensive tackle and their best receiver. So right off the bat, you lose both of those guys pretty much early on. And then you never really found replacements. Like you played musical chairs with a couple of offensive linemen, but you were playing guys that Mario brought in from Oregon and Logan Sagapalu and just guys that he'd brought in that played for him over there that had never played at Oregon, that were bench guys, and that's who you kind of went with on your offensive line. And so they never really got to establish the running game that they wanted. Their running backs were banged up as well. You lost Don Chaney in camp. So from a roster perspective, it was just a bad start. Like, you were playing backups from the beginning. And after that Texas A&M game, it just felt like they lost something. Like, not only did they lose the game, but it felt like they lost sort of their enthusiasm, the players. And they never really recovered it. And Tyler, at a certain point, Tyler Van Dyke started to play well. I think it was the Virginia Tech game where him and Colby Young, the JUCO transfer that they brought in at receiver, started to hook up and make big plays. And you thought, okay, maybe this is where Miami turns it on and they get to a bowl game and they finish 7-5 or win 8 games. And then Tyler goes out and gets hurt, and he was pretty much banged up, for the second half of the season, dealing with shoulder injury. So it was a bad first year for Mario. But, I feel like, in all honesty, he was so focused on just flipping this roster anyway. I don't want to say he didn't care about finishing 5-7, but I think at a certain point, the focus became, all right, it's about next year now. It's about playing some of these young guys, and that's what the season became.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so interesting to me is, like, Andy, remember the argument that I got into Ralph Russo about, like, this year you're not going to be special, so
the Penn State
do everything that you can in this year to make yourself better the following year if the season's going to be a wash. It is an interesting pro-con discussion if you talk to people who believe that year one. I think there's a difference between
a 10-2 season and a 5-7, 4-8 type season. Like,
no, I know, but would you take a 10-2 season that was pretty good with older players that might not be? Like, what would mean more to Miami? Getting that young experience for next year?
Yeah, but Miami wasn't going to have a 10-2 season. Miami was at best going to have a 7-5 or a 6-6 season.
Would you rather have a 7-5 season that is respectable and you fight hard and you play well, you don't get embarrassed, you don't get your butt kicked by, who was it?
Florida State.
No, it wasn't Florida State.
Middle Tennessee State.
I got to tell you, do you know the term chasing the dragon? In gambling?
Well, yeah.
Where they have
heroin,
live betting.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Opiates,
Heroin and gambling. I chased the dragon all the way down in that game of Miami money line. It's like Miami minus, I don't remember what the spread was, but every time Middle Tennessee scored, I hit it again. And I think I lost 7 bets betting on Miami just to win that football game. And then by the time it was the fourth quarter, I was like, did they really just get their ass kicked? Because they just got their ass kicked. But what I'm saying is, would you rather get a 7-5 respectable year where
they hadn't even gone young at that point, Ari? This example is bad.
I'm saying. No, I'm not done.
Yeah.
Where you stick with those guys.
Well, once you get your ass kicked by Middle Tennessee State, all bets are off. You can
go
over if you want.
You can't, like, you have a respectable year.
That's not the Penn. Yeah, that's not the Penn State argument we had. Like,
I'm not trying to make it the Penn State argument. Right. I'm trying to say.
Once you get your ass kicked by Middle Tennessee State, like you said, you can say it's a rebuild.
You said earlier in the year or early in the podcast that Danny White told you that first year success is really important. Right?
I agree, but they didn't set themselves up for first year success.
But first year competency, if you have first year competency, is that more important than getting young guys action in this scenario, or is it just a disaster?
I do think it hurts you in recruiting to be incompetent on the field. Like that I know individual games don't matter to recruits,
but the total picture does.
And so, like, again, all bets are off once you get your ass kicked by Middle Tennessee State, because pretending to be competent isn't going to happen either.
Listen,
everybody knows.
I was going to say, they were guys that they wanted, like Brandon Innes, for instance, right? Who signed with Ohio State, who's a 5-star receiver in their backyard. Like, that's a guy that they wanted to impress with this offense. They lost Brandon Innes essentially because there's no way he's going to go play for this offense.
Brian Hartline's like, look at that, and then look at what we do. Where do you want to go? It's really not hard.
Well, I mean, but that's not fair either. Miami could have gone 10-2, and you could have still made that statement.
Yeah, but there might have been some hope, and to go 10-2 where it would have required some competence, and so maybe it's a little bit different. But no, I am curious, Manny, how that affects, because again, you're right. Mario is very focused on recruiting, on flipping the roster, and do they have to be better this year? And this is, again, I feel like we cannot talk about Mario without talking about Billy Napier. Like, do they have to be better this year, or does that whole flipping the roster, getting better players part just fall apart because they're like, well, crap, you don't win anything. Why do I play there?
Look, they lost 5 home games this year, and it was embarrassing, right? Like, it was nasty. There were a lot of recruits that were in attendance for the Florida State game that was 45-3 or whatever it was, and a lot of guys left the stadium that night like, okay, yeah, this is bad. Like, this is not a program that's close to winning, and these are a lot of 2024 guys that are super talented that Mario wants on this roster. And it left an impression. So to me, what he needs to do this year is he's got to have a competent offense. Whether or not they win more than 8 games or 7 games, like, I don't know that matters. I just think you got to score points and you got to show people that, hey, we actually have this thing going in the right direction.
The arrow needs to point up. Yes. I think that makes sense. Like, you don't have to win the ACC or play for the ACC title, but the arrow has to point up.
Right. You just got to show you have a pulse on offense. I mean, it was really bad.
Are we in desperation mode here in year 2 already?
Kind of.
Isn't everybody right away? I mean,
I don't know. I mean,
think about the investment Miami made, Ari. Because this was something that was decades in the making. That it was always, well, if Miami spent like everybody else, they could get back to doing what they used to do. Well, now they are. And it turned out it's not so easy to just turn the money faucet on and have it work.
Manny, I said this to you on Stars Matter. If Mario can't do it, I don't know who can. Like, I honestly don't know who's next on the.
I agree 1,000%. Like, to me, he's the one guy who wants the job, right? Like, he's the one guy who's going to grind the way you need to grind on the recruiting trail to get you the kind of players you need to get back on the map. So I don't know who else has the passion to do that. Maybe Ed Reed does. That might be the only other guy I could imagine right now who wants to get into coaching and do this. But to deal with what you have to deal with at Miami, or had to deal with in the past, and then the pressure of the fan base and everything else, and just that whole vicious circle that happens every year. I don't know how many guys want this Miami job. There are a lot of other guys that Miami went after in years past that didn't want this job.
When you said that, can I take this podcast with my hand? I'm going to grab this podcast. I'm going to pull it down into grab-ass land for a minute.
Let's go.
Okay. Because you said something that it felt like a lightning bolt hit the tip of, yeah, you get it. Ed Reed.
Tip of what?
It's from a movie. It feels like a light bulb hit the tip of my.
Okay. I don't even remember that movie, so that's all right.
I'll send you the link. I think it's from Step Brothers.
That's why.
If Deion Sanders, again, this is nuts, okay? But if Deion Sanders proves that you can build it in an alternate way by being a recognizable former player who has great connections with players and can get guys there and it works. Like, could Ed Reed be an example? And I'm not giving up on the Mario Cristobal era. I'm just talking in fun podcast.
Mario Cristobal, also a recognizable former player.
No. But I'm saying, like, somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience. Like, I feel like Ed Reed, in a world where it's like there's no other Deions, like Ed Reed in South Florida could potentially kind of match that same energy. He might not be able to get to Deion Sanders' land, but I
don't think people understand how good Deion is as a marketer. Like, Deion is a PhD level marketer.
I saw the Ed Reed YouTube video.
I saw it too. And listen, Ed would connect with players for sure. But would he be able to market his program the way that Deion has? I don't know. That's it. Deion came in there with a media strategy, and it's not the normal one. Like, people don't like covering Deion because it's not the same as everybody else. He doesn't act the same way. He doesn't go through the same channels as everybody else because he doesn't need us. Like, yet he gets us talking about him anyway. So that's the part that I think people miss with Deion. There are a lot of really good former players who have a lot to give, who want to work with players, who want to make them better, who want to help their alma maters get better. It's not the same thing.
So, yeah, we were talking on Stars Matter, like, is there any other former player that could galvanize a roster or a program or the sport the way that Deion does. And I guess the answer might just be that he's a unicorn. Like I was trying to come up with like other amazing players from the 90s, early 2000s.
What about Tebow?
Nope.
You don't think he could do that at Florida?
I don't know that he'd want to get into the nitty gritty of it. Like you have to like it. You have to want to be around there 16 hours a day.
Right.
I'm not built for that. Like I wouldn't want to.
No, I know, but like
that job.
I think what Manny's
Like,
trying to
a
say
lot of
is
people aren't.
who would be a lightning rod like that?
I mean, Tebow is that type of personality.
Right.
And
yeah,
and
I mean,
he gets the response.
I mean,
Yeah.
could a guy like that thrive with the right support system? In other words, if Florida were to hire and have the athletic director who knew who to hire as far as coaches and to support staff, just to make Tebow successful, to put the recruiters around him, to put the kind of people that he needs.
He would have to want it so bad. Like that's the thing is Deion wanted it so bad that he was willing to take Jackson State to prove it.
Right.
And I don't know that there's another player who creates that sort of lightning rod effect that wants it that bad. Like maybe it's Ed, because Ed was going to go to Bethune-Cookman.
Right.
Bethune-Cookman is a tough job. I watched Alvin Wyatt in his ostrich skin boots stomp around there for a while. When we played Mainland, that was their home field.
Right.
Mainland High School's home field too. Like that is a tough situation that he was going to walk into. And if the administration wasn't ready to provide him, because it sounds like neither party really understood what the other one was coming from.
No. That was Ed coming to them saying, "Hey, this is what I want to do," and Bethune ultimately being like, "Wait a minute, you're gonna badmouth us on social media? Forget this. We don't want any part of it." And they weren't willing to make any concessions. So
they didn't understand. Deion badmouthed the entire HBCU system on social media in an attempt to try to make it better. Like he was trying to change it.
Mitch came up with a good one though, and things are going well at Tennessee right now. But Peyton Manning.
Oh yeah.
The way he's thrown himself into the production code. I heard Julian Edelman talking in an interview about doing Peyton coming on Julian Edelman's show and sending him like a massive outline of what the appearance would be like and what plays needed to be pulled on video for him to explain. And here's how I'm going to explain it. Like Peyton might be that detail oriented if that's what he decided he wanted to do.
And it didn't have to be at Tennessee. Like,
no, it could be anywhere.
It didn't start for Deion at Florida State. So
Peyton Manning resonates anywhere you are.
If you put Peyton Manning and made him the head coach at Arizona, would they get dudes?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and he seems like Deion, the type of person who would throw himself into all of it and would have a good strategy.
And it's flashy in a much different way, but it's still flashy in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's more palatable to a certain kind of person, but I think the way Deion's doing it is very palatable as well.
Yeah.
In this era.
I know this is your guys' show, but I want to flip this and ask you a
It's
question.
your show today, Manny.
Do you think, seeing how Deion, with the success he had at Jackson State, and maybe that happens now at Colorado, with the amount of money being fed into, through TV contracts with the SEC and Big Ten, do you think any SEC or Big Ten schools that are on the bottom side of this maybe venture in the next 5 to 10 years to say, we're going to make a move like this? We're going to hire another Ed Reed. We're going to hire a Deion Sanders.
I actually think if Deion works at Colorado, that people on the top of the SEC and the Big Ten, or who want to be on the top of the SEC and the Big Ten and are not, will hire Deion Sanders. Like that, they'll be willing to do it.
The thing that's interesting about
Deion,
Deion,
to see proof of concept first.
The thing that's interesting about Deion Sanders to me is he went to Colorado, and it seemed like the only thing that mattered to him was that they were in the Power Five, right? Because they needed the money and the resources. I don't know if that's true though, because it sounds like some other ones reached out. But Colorado was the most willing to kind of play ball with him and give him everything he wanted. The Power 5 program that was able to let him do it his way.
Yeah.
Like location geographically, I meant. Like it's
oh yeah, I don't think that matters.
It didn't matter. The school could have been on Mars.
Yeah.
So if Deion Sanders makes Colorado into a Pac-12 champion, or dare I dream, a college football playoff team that wins a game in January, what would be the point of him ever leaving?
bigger challenge, more money. If he hits a ceiling,
Right.
what if he wants to win a national title and you don't feel like you can win it there?
His whole thing is the Deion persona.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if it works to the highest regard, they could win a national championship there.
They could, but we're a lot of steps away from that.
No, I know, but I'm saying if it works, what is Mississippi State or anybody else in the SEC going to offer him? I guess more money, but he doesn't seem to be driven by that.
I think if he feels like he could reach the highest level, he stays. If he feels like he's hit a ceiling, then he looks elsewhere.
Yeah.
And we're also just assuming this is going to work. It might
be terrible. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
So I just think it's an amazing experiment to watch because, and we've talked about this a few times on the show, Manny, like I do tend to agree with Deion and some of the other former players that they have a lot to give and they have a certain level of expertise and level of, knowledge that they didn't sit there grinding as a GA.
Right.
But they have something that might be more important than the guy grinding as a GA had.
Absolutely. And I think they're right in the sense that they could skip a couple steps. There's no reason they couldn't, right? They lived that life. They experienced it at the highest levels. So a guy like Deion, a guy like Ed Reed, like I don't know why they shouldn't be able to skip a couple steps.
Well, the thing too is that if Deion Sanders actually is successful, I don't know if hiring Deion Sanders is the topic. The topic is whether or not he shifts the entire paradigm of the way people view the hiring process.
Yeah. And it's, listen, you still have to hire well, which again, this comes back to Mario Cristobal. You have to hire well. Like, what are we most excited about that Deion has done? For me, it's hiring Sean Lewis as the offensive coordinator. I want to see that offense with the players that Deion can bring in.
I would argue it's signing Travis Hunter, right? Like, I would say get the number one player in the country.
I meant since he got to Colorado.
Right.
No, but what he's saying though is that, in my opinion, is it's one thing to get the players, but if you instill a situation where they can succeed, it seems to me that like you could make the case that Sean Lewis from Kent State, who, by the way, watched a lot of Wednesday night football in my day.
Yeah.
A lot of fun to watch. And I think he was a head coaching candidate for he was on lists.
Yes. Sean Lewis not being a head coach anymore actually does change our head coach Royal Rumble rankings because he was way up there. Like he wasn't, I don't know if he was quite to Luke Fickell territory, but he was up there. So.
Yeah. And it might have been the most significant coordinator hire of the cycle.
Very well could be. Well, hey, Miami hasn't hired one yet. So
we have no idea.
They should do what the New England Patriots did and hire Ed Reed to be the offensive coordinator.
There you go. That would bring
somebody who's never called plays before.
Yeah, and was a defensive coach and a defensive player. Yeah.
And the Patriots just hired Bill O'Brien from Alabama, so that didn't work. So, but yes, I like where your head's at, Ari. I like that you're experimenting.
You mean that hiring a defensive coordinator to call offensive plays didn't work? I'm shocked to hear that.
I know, crazy. I like the idea that Bill Belichick was just raising his level of difficulty on himself.
It's like playing, if you're like an NBA player playing with one arm time behind your back.
He wasn't challenged anymore. He was cranking it up from All-American to Dynasty. That's what he was doing. So, all right, guys, we got to pause real quick. When we come back, though, I do want to talk to Manny about a story he wrote earlier this month about a little bit how the recruiting ranking sausage is made, because we talk about dudes and 5 stars a lot. Well, how does that get figured out? We'll be right back. I was talking to my wife about my workout routines the other day, and she said, you should start doing some yoga. I said, yeah, you're right. I should. And then I didn't even think about how will I find yoga? Where do I need to go to a studio? I don't even have to worry about that because I am a Peloton member. If I need a yoga workout, I flip on my Peloton app and I find hundreds of yoga workouts that fit my schedule, that fit my ability level, and that make me work because they've got it all. I know what you're thinking. You hear Peloton, you're like, that's the bike. Well, it is the bike, but it's also the treadmill. It's also the free weight workouts. It's the boot camp workouts. They've got something for everybody. I've got to go on a trip this week. I'll be in a hotel gym. There will be tread boot camp workouts with Adrian Williams and Jess Sims. that will be as hard as anything I can do in a regular gym. And dumbbells only go up to 50 pounds in the hotel gym. But guess what? I am going to be working my butt off because those guys know how to push you and they know what you're dealing with. That's the thing. Peloton understands that professionals need to be able to fit stuff into a schedule. They need to be able to do it on the road. That busy working parents don't have time sometimes to do an hour and a half or 2 hours or go make an appointment with a personal trainer. Peloton, you just pop open the app. There is a workout there that you can do, that you can fit into your schedule. And trust me, it works. Try Peloton risk-free with a 30-day home trial, new members only, not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial. That's onepeloton.com/home-trial. For the longest time, I couldn't understand why they could make athletic clothes that could wick sweat away and make me feel comfortable all the time. But they couldn't do that for stuff I could wear in a work situation. Well, Roan fixed that. Roan didn't start advertising until after they saw me wearing the Roan commuter polo on a podcast because I owned 3 of them already. It was my favorite polo. They also made my favorite pants, and it's just a perfect match. These are clothes that you can wear in any situation. You can play golf. You can go to work. You can go to the beach. You can go to a meeting. And we don't live in a super formal society anymore. The pandemic took away a lot of that. So it's really good if we're just wearing pants at this point. Well, if you want to look great, you should be wearing some Roan pants. The commuter jogger, my absolute favorite pants that I own. Men's closets were due for radical reinvention. Roan stepped up to the challenge. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Roan is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner all day. That's right. Throw this stuff in the washing machine. You put it in the dryer. It comes out looking great. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So head to roan.com/Andy23. Use the promo code Andy23 and save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to roan.com/Andy23. That's RHONE.com/Andy23. Use the code Andy23, 20% off your entire order. It's time to find your corner office comfort with Roan. Okay, we are back. Manny just got a message, or Ari somebody just got a message.
It was me.
Probably about a 5-star because you had a great story about a week ago in The Athletic. We were talking about what matters when it comes to ranking the top prospects. And you talked to Andrew Ivins, who's the director of scouting at 24/7 Sports. And he was explaining the situation and how he gets hit up by coaches. How could my guy drop a star? Like, and they use the composite, or they do the composite at 24/7. So they make their own rankings. But then if Rivals or ESPN or On3 drop somebody, then the person might fall in the composite. And in this particular case, when you're talking to Andrew, it wasn't even his fault. So how does that work? How do they decide how many 5-stars there are?
Yeah, and Andrew and I had this conversation a couple of years ago when I was doing a local radio station here. He would come in and we would talk, and this was before he was the scouting director for 247. And so I know all of this has been his thought process, but essentially it's all built on 32 first-round draft picks. Like, that's what it's supposed to be. So 247 ranks 32 5-stars every single year.
We debated this on the show last week.
And then the composite
It wasn't a debate. I knew what the reason was, and you guys were like, "No, that's not."
No. I said I was on.
Okay.
Go back and listen to it, bud.
Okay.
But the composite, ultimately, you could have a change. You know, that number can change as far as how many 5-stars, obviously, because if ESPN and On3 and other publications think a guy's a 5-star and he gets enough points, then he becomes a composite 5-star. But ultimately, 247 only ranks 32.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the numbers have changed a little bit because the 4-stars, and that's what Bud Elliott, our friend who works for 24/7, who coined the term blue chip ratio and said you need to have at least 50% 4 and 5 stars on your roster to have a chance to win the national title. Well, it's interesting because the number of 4-stars has in the composite, and again, so this isn't just 24/7, this is everybody's composite rankings. The number of 4-stars has risen each of the past 4 years. So we got like some great inflation going on here.
Exactly. I think a lot of it is favors, right? Like all those coaches calling in saying, why'd you drop my guy to a 3-star? Or why isn't he a 4-star? Those are probably the extra like 50 favors of
Are you saying that it's not a sacred process?
Hey, listen, it's hard to rank 3,000 dudes, right? Like, I mean, how do you do that every single year?
Are you saying that the Bible wasn't written by God right now?
Is that
what he said?
There's something leaking out your ears. Are you okay?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't like that last part, Manny.
I apologize. All right, didn't mean to burst your bubble there.
We're gonna rechange the recruiting podcast on favors matter.
I mean, that is sort of the issue. There's a back and forth there, and I don't think they want to do it too much, but yeah, if somebody's going to give you some access or give you, it'd be hard to say no, wouldn't it?
Right.
Because who's going to know?
I mean, at this point, right? Like, what recruiting department is not talking to the 247 guy or the on-3 guy to give them exchange information, right? Like, I mean,
because we talked, Manny, on the podcast. We had Bruce on, and he had that great story about the NFL All-Pro team and how the offensive players were ranked so low generally coming out of high school. And we explained that like Nick Saban or Kirby Smart, they do their own evaluation. They're not looking at the rankings and saying we must get this guy because he's a 5-star. They're just looking at all the players that are available, and we're saying we must get this guy because we like him. It just so happens that most of those guys are the same as the 5-stars. But I mean, that's the thing. It does matter to all of the recruiting departments how many 5-stars or 4-stars they sign.
I will say this. If you were a coach who is calling a recruiting analyst complaining about your guy getting dropped a star, you're going to get fired eventually. Like if that's where you're at,
if you're worried about that,
because if you're worried about that,
contracts, they get a bonus,
right?
Yeah. That's called insider trading.
Right. You don't think that happens in recruiting?
No. Ari's going to call the SEC and not that SEC.
No. Yeah. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. What I'm saying is that the people who are oriented on that and care about what it looks like on paper, the chickens are going to come home to roost, and those players are going to see the field, or they're not going to see the field, and they're going to be hits or they're going to be misses. And coaches get raises and extensions because they used those rankings accurately in order to boost their product on the field. Now, you could juice the numbers, you could cook your books if you want, but all you're going to do is make yourself look worse in the long run, because then people are going to think you can't develop the talent.
We've also seen staffs who at the end of the cycle will grab some 4-stars that maybe that everybody knows they're not going to qualify, just to boost that final ranking. And don't worry about the fallout from it in June.
Look, there's no question that guys are looking at the scoreboard with the recruiting rankings. Like they care about all that stuff, man. It matters to them, not just in terms of helping them maybe get a job. I'm talking about the assistants here, right? Like being the recruiter of the year. I'm not talking about the head coaches. The head coaches, of course, have to win on the field, but every one of these dudes in the recruiting department, like they want to be able to put on their resume, I was part of bringing in the number 9 ranked recruiting class. Like, and so. To me, like it's gonna affect the rankings. Now, Andrew, I will tell you, he's probably spends as much time as anybody actually watching film. So I'm not gonna accuse Andrew Ivins of cooking the books, but certainly he's got people around him that have to field those phone calls.
Barton Simmons, his predecessor, is actually doing this for a team now. Like he's the general manager at Vanderbilt. So
and also the thing you have to consider too is that if you cook your books too much, then you water down your product. And if your product becomes unreliable, then your business goes away. So exactly. I'm not saying that adding an extra star to 30 guys a cycle at the end is going to do it. But if it comes to a point where it becomes unreliable, the numbers will bear out. And the other thing I'll say too is, and I've said on the show since the beginning, since I was like, Andy just had me on as a guest, that I think that athletic directors have to be more seasoned and more willing to look at the recruiting rankings, because it's not, and it's not individual rankings of players, but you can get a very good sense about how effective your coach is being in that space by looking at the context of it. And if you're in a position where that's important to you adding an extra star to the dude at the bottom of your class isn't going to help paint the picture.
No,
I mean, the picture is there for everyone to see. Are you getting it done or are you not? And
you don't have to be a scout. Like the AD doesn't have to be able
I'm not
to
a scout
these players. But here's one piece of information that I think is always very important. Who were the players finalists? Who else did they seriously consider?
Which are also juiced sometimes, but yes.
No, but I mean, but you know for real. Like
who else wanted him is the way to
yeah,
yeah.
Exactly. Who else wanted him? And if it's schools you consider your peer group, that's great. Or even above where your peer group is. If it's
that's your guide to NIL,
group,
Andy. Your guide to NIL should be tax bracket, not tax bracket, money bracket based on other committable offers you have.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good way to do it.
If you get an Alabama offer, you get $100,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Alabama,
really Georgia, or Ohio State offer gets you.
Now, do you just have to say that you got an offer, or
no? You have to have it.
You?
It has to be. It has to be real. They have to actually want you.
I'm working on a story right now with Grace about uncommittable offers and kind of why they happen and why are they even effective or what it is. And there is so much going on with fake offers in terms of, parents trying to, get that first offer that might not be committable in order to try to, juice up the process and stuff. Like who you're offered from is such a easy thing to sift through. Like who are real offers? The question shouldn't be how many.
If you have a Clemson offer, they really want you.
But if you have an offer from Georgia and they're not calling you,
right? You don't have
an offer from Georgia. Yeah. So like there's enough context out there to know who is actually being recruited by who.
Yes. Like, and they know, like, who's visiting the school, who's being invited to come over and over and over. Like
how often do you talk to the coach? When's the last time you went? Yeah.
So it is interesting how that works. And the whole system is, again, you just get rid of signing day and say you can sign any player you want as long as they're in high school. The fake offers would disappear overnight.
Here's how you do it.
Okay.
You get $100,000 NIL boost every time you take an official visit to a team that went to the playoff the previous year.
Ooh, I like it.
And that would encourage kids to take more visits.
It would.
How do you fix this, though?
But somebody has to pay for that.
The NIL people are paying $13 million for Jaden Rashada.
But they're not. It's fake money.
I know. I'm kidding.
I was talking to Mitch about this the other day, but the calendar, like, isn't there a way to fix this so that you don't have any more Jaden Rashada issues?
There's always going to be another Jaden Rashada, as long as this system is in place.
Do you think it was the calendar, or do you think it was the fact that the checks weren't clearing?
Yeah, well, I think it had to do with the calendar, but I think it had to do with the date on
But what would you change about the calendar to make what would the calendar be to have him at Florida right now?
Here's my idea. My idea is, okay, a lot of these kids are done with recruiting in the summertime, right? The best of the best kids know where they're going.
Yep.
Have an August signing period, and when you sign legally, you can start collecting NIL, because at that point
that is what the coaches would like,
because you become a promoter for that university. And so you can collect.
You know why the coaches would like that? Because it makes it much harder to fire them.
Absolutely.
Come November.
And it also makes it much harder to, the reason why there isn't that, but like, I do think that the early signing period being 60 days before the late signing period is stupid.
It's
like,
dumb.
if it's going to be early,
it was a half measure. What did Mike Ehrmantraut say about half measures?
I remember the story, what Mike Ehrmantraut said. He's never going to do it again.
Exactly.
You remember?
Exactly.
Yeah, the episode was called Half Measure.
Right. So it was a half measure. The idea was it was supposed to be where Manny said in August. And now this was pre-NIL. Now, Manny, I like your NIL idea. That would require most of the states to change their laws. But I do think that's probably due for an overhaul anyway, just because there's a lot of states where they care deeply about college football where they're like, we're kind of falling behind because our law is stupid. So let's fix that.
Think about like how many players would be at different programs right now if the August early signing period existed. Like Austin Novosad would be at Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the only people who wouldn't sign would be the 5-star prospects that hold the leverage. Everybody else would be like, either you sign with us now or you're not committed.
Yeah, because like Austin Novosad, like Jeff Grimes didn't leave, Dave Aranda didn't leave, so there'd be no reason for him to leave.
He recommitted to Baylor in the middle of the process in the
right,
summertime.
and Oregon
around
would never
August.
come because they'd be like, well, he signed and we can't get him.
And how many teams would get players who were late bloomers signed already that wouldn't flip at the last minute? Like, would Cormani McLean be at Miami, or did he sign after, or did he commit to Miami?
He didn't
after?
Commit till October. But,
October.
You know, he has the flexibility. He's the number 2 player in the country.
Yeah, so. he would probably drag it out.
So, like, the question I have is, if you moved it to August, would that be advantageous for the kids, for the prospects,
for the Jaden Rashadas of the world, right? Who had financial issues, right? His family, like he would have been locked into a school. He'd be collecting his money. And you wouldn't have a Jaden Rashada.
He's from California. He could have been collecting the money all along.
Right.
So,
but also, what about the kid from Toledo, Ohio, who's a 3-star prospect and is committed to Bowling Green, who rushes for 1,200 more yards than he did the year before and grows an inch in his senior season, who's committed to Toledo and would have had offers from Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State if he stayed.
Well, the good news is he can play a year at Toledo or Bowling Green and then go to one of those places.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's the case now that the transfer stuff
and he can start an NIL free agent bidding war where if I'm a person paying for the NIL, I'm going to be much more likely to give him some serious cash after he's rushed for 1,500 yards at Toledo than coming out of high school.
I took the time down on you just saying that, and I'm going to steal it and write a column about it. Thank you.
Oh, great. Can I get some credit for that? Like,
nope.
Just a line at the bottom in italics. Andy Staples contributed to this report.
It's my beautiful mind that came up with it. Yeah, thank you.
Damn it.
How many subscriptions did I sell last year on The Athletic, plagiarizing Andy's verbal points, you think?
No, you plagiarize your own verbal points. It was fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm going to plagiarize your thought.
Perfectly good.
Because I think that is the most reasonable solution. Because I've always thought that having an early signing period is good for the players who have spots and good for the 5-star players, but it wasn't good for 70% of the country. Because all it would do is force kids who might not be 100% sure to commit to places that they probably wouldn't have ended up at. It's just going to add more pressure to the plates of the unpaid athletes. But now that NIL exists,
yeah, they could just leave after a year.
And transferring can leave.
Yeah.
But that would, I mean, think about that. How hectic this job would become and how much more amazing this podcast would be.
Exactly.
Like if we had National Signing Day, like early signing period.
Yeah, if you're that player who blew up after signing with Bowling Green in August, like you don't have to feel pressured or feel like I'm locked into this. You go, all right, I'm going to go ball out at Bowling Green, and then the bidding war begins.
Right.
And then high school opt-outs. And what about a player who goes to Bowling Green under those circumstances and rushes for 675 yards in the first 3 weeks?
Then he was probably where he was supposed. Oh, in the first 3 weeks.
And then opts out in the middle of the year.
Red shirt.
I'm like it. I think it would be awesome, but it would probably lead to more professionalization of the sport.
The MAC coaches are not going to like us for this.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough to be a MAC
like
coach
us for this.
We started off the podcast by talking about.
This is why we keep telling the MAC coaches to go become Power 5 coordinators.
Yeah, I was going to say we started the show off saying, is Joe Moorhead going to leave? Yeah. If he hears this prompt, he might.
Jeez. Sorry, Akron. Sorry, Bowling Green. Sorry, Toledo. Sorry, Eastern Michigan.
But that's their spot on the food chain too. Like, I don't know if I feel bad.
I agree with you. You are where you are in the food chain. If you don't like it, move somewhere else on the food chain. I realize that's difficult, but that's life.
It's like you don't feel bad for animals.
Everybody else has to deal with that in their own professional lives. Like,
yeah,
you may not be where you want to be on your professional food chain. It's up to you to fix that. That's not everybody else's problem to fix.
Mm-hmm. And we don't make the rules to cater to people at the bottom of the food chain.
No, exactly.
Unless it's the college football playoff.
That's at the bottom. I don't think 12 out of 130 is the bottom.
We have
a long way to go before we hit the bottom.
I had to needle you. I'm sorry. I had to.
Long way to go before you hit bottom. Now, when they make it the 98 team or 90 team NCAA basketball tournament,
Andy, you're going to be writing a column in 7 years saying this thing needs to be 24. More good football. Would people watch?
Maybe
more games, more football. Would people watch?
I don't know. It's more games at that point. I think you probably have to start taking games away. So, I think they may have reached the point of diminishing return. We'll find out, but we'll see if my opinion changes on that. So, Manny, thank you for joining us. This has been a pleasure.
Yes, had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Can we bug you again very soon?
Sure, whenever you need me.
Dude, that's 2 podcasts in 2 weeks, Manny. You're just gonna be a regular soon.
I'm moving up the food chain.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Listen, Manny's never worried about his place on the food chain. He is the shark. He is the apex predator.
Yeah, gentlemen, speaking of the food chain, I'm in Houston and I have an hour and a half to kill. You got to send me somewhere to go eat.
Blood Brothers Barbecue.
I'm in the Woodlands. I shouldn't have said Houston.
Okay. Well, now I have to look at a map because I can't. The Woodlands. All
right.
What's in what suburb? But if you happen to get that way, Blood Brothers Barbecue is spectacular. Pinkerton's Barbecue also very good in Houston.
It also has to be healthy. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Listen, little pulled pork, some collard greens, not the end of the world. You're not your trainer's not going to get too mad.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We will talk later. Ari and I will get you ready for the second National Signing Day coming up on Wednesday. We'll be right back. No, we're not. We'll talk to you tomorrow.